Right, good evening, everyone. People are popping into the webinar, so we're going to give just a minute for folks to get online. We have a large panel here this evening, so you'll see a lot of faces popping in. So just we'll give it another minute and then we'll go ahead and begin. All right, well, since we have a really full agenda, we're going to go ahead and get started. We do have a number of panelists here this evening who will be speaking throughout the night. And so to keep things a little bit simpler for our folks watching, our panelists may turn off their cameras while they are not speaking so that there's a fewer faces to try to keep organized on your screen as we begin to talk. But as we move from topic to topic, I will be sure to introduce everybody. We are recording this webinar so that we can post it up on our website, on the YouTube channel, and send it out to folks who may not have been able to join us this evening. These webinars can be hard to make in the middle of a busy week, but we want to make sure that this is accessible to any of our families at the school so that they can watch and check out what we are doing here at Miramonte in curriculum. And this panel is the second in a series of panels that we hope to offer throughout this year, focusing on specifically our work in bringing equity into our curriculum and meeting some of our goals on our Miramonte equity plan. And so I'll start the evening by mirroring my screen and reviewing what some of those goals are. And then we will begin with our first set of panelists talking to you about the really great work that they are doing in the classroom, which I promise will be far more engaging than me speaking at you for the rest of the evening. Just to norm us before we go into mirroring the screen, there is the option for those watching in the webinar to ask questions, so feel free to do that. I will be monitoring the questions and trying to answer as our panelists speak, and if there are additional questions that I cannot answer, I'll make sure to send those over to our panelists so that they can answer those for you. So as we go into mirroring here, so I'd like to begin our conversations about equity by really talking about what we focus on here at Miramonte High School. You can see here that in the very center, we really place equity in the center of everything that we do. And that's no exception when we talk about curriculum. And to us, equity means that we believe that all students can learn and connect at high levels. So through our presentation today, we're going to move inward in this circle. We're going to start with some descriptions of what is happening in classrooms, hearing from some of our teachers who are developing some really innovative lessons to bring an equity lens into their classroom. Then we're going to dig a little bit into how that happens and pull apart the layers to look at what's happening behind the scenes as we develop these lessons. We'll hear from some teachers and students who are working collaboratively on that process through our curriculum consultant program during that part of the webinar. And lastly, we're going to reconnect with our why and hear firsthand from some of our students who are taking our new Deconstructing Race class at Miramonte High School about their experiences in that class and how that's going for them. It's a new class this year, so there's a lot we're learning every day about that class, and we'll be hearing from our students and our teacher of that class this evening. So just to remind folks about what curriculum reform means to us at Miramonte High School, we have this goal. It's one of 4 big goals that we have within our equity plan around curriculum reform. And our goal is to redesign curriculum around ensuring the incorporation of multiple perspectives and eliminating false narratives that perpetuate white supremacy. And we have 3 real action items that fall under that. The first one focuses on bringing in more core texts into our English curriculum that diversify the voices that our students get to experience in those classes. We'll hear from an English 2 teacher tonight talking about one of the new texts that we've brought in that falls under that first action item. The second action item involves identifying gaps and missing content in our social studies curriculum specifically. And we'll hear from a team of students and teachers who are working on just that this evening, talking specifically about 2 of our classes within our social science department. And lastly, we want to establish direction for all of our teams to identify SMART goals around curricular changes and accountability. And you'll hear that threaded throughout the various conversations tonight. And so we hope that that gives you some good updates on where we are in this important goal. So we're going to start with the what, like I mentioned before. So I'd love to call forward Ms. Maloney, Ms. Boyko, and Ms. Spencer to go ahead and turn on their cameras. And we're going to get to hear from them about some things that are going on within their classrooms.
All right. Salvete omnes, ego sum magistra. I teach Latin 2, Latin 3, and AP Latin at Miramonte, as well as a section of AP Euro. And this talk is called Hidden Figures, a comparison of pedagogy on ethnographic encounters, Gauls and Native Americans. So just to back up, explain this talk, over the summer, I took an AP College Board AP Latin teaching seminar for Latin teachers across the United States online. And I was really interested after 1 year of teaching this course to understand how better to approach Caesar's Gallic Wars and the issue of ethnography. And the reason for this is because I'm also a historian. And some 20 odd years ago, I did my first master's degree in British colonial history in the 19th century, looking at race, class, and gender amongst Black female chiefs and female medical missionaries in Zimbabwe. And so I was interested in how you could approach race when teaching an ancient topic like Caesar. And so I asked this question over the Zoom to all the other Latin teachers and the professor giving the seminar. And she said to me, "What a great question. You should give a paper on that at the American Classical League Institute." And I thought, oh, okay. So this is, to give you an idea, not even a diamond in the rough. This is still a lump of coal that is forming here about this idea that I'm working on to hope to present next summer at the American Classical League Institute. So in understanding ethnography, or how we study other cultures and communities, usually the AP Latin curriculum focuses on looking at Caesar's Gallic Wars as a key tool as part of Caesar's political and military propaganda machine, or as part of a larger complex narrative to look at securing popular support for Caesar's political motivations and machinations back in Rome, and the issues around Romanization, that's a big term in the classical studies world, of Gaul itself. But my issue is, how does this fit within a larger trend of classical ethnography? So we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to reframe this whole study by doing a comparison, because when you use terms, at least in imperial history, dealing with frontier or Romanization, it's very loaded, okay? There's no such thing really as a frontier. If you look at this map of Gaul on the right, it's a frontier for the Romans, but it's not a frontier for the Gauls. They live there. It's their land, yeah? And using a frontier analogy is creating a sense of conquest and conquering, which is really a 19th century mindset. So in order to teach the students that, I looked at a comparative approach by using Stanford University's SHEG, or Stanford History Education Group's lessons on reframing narratives from American history. So I had the students look at narratives on the Lewis and Clark expedition, because often you cover that in US history, and also the Lakota Sioux involved in the Battle of Little Bighorn with Custer. And what was great about this is those lessons brought in narratives that were not just from a colonial white settler perspective or colonizer perspective, but from an indigenous narrative perspective. And this really then made the students question, what does then that look like if we talk about the Romans and the Gauls? And what was really cool about it, as you can see from this slide here, is that there actually this romanticization of the frontier happens in the art, both in the 19th century with Native American populations, but also in classical art. As you can see, this is a statue of what is known as the Dying Gaul. So my students interested in art history were really interested in that. If you could go to the next slide, please. So one of the things I tried to do in reframing the narrative was teach the students about new concepts of thinking about what happens when two cultures encounter each other. And to do this, I looked at Professor Richard White's notion of what's called the middle ground. He's a very famous professor of environmental history at Stanford. And he argues in his book on Native American groups in the upstate New York area, that the interaction between different communities in terms of the contested space is about finding commonality and accommodation rather than very simplistic and 19th century narratives of war, conquest, and assimilation. So I had the students then look at these different sources and consider, what does that term Romanization mean? It's very loaded. It's not just a top-down approach. Consider, what do you do for alternative evidence of narratives? We don't have ancient Gaul accounts like the way we do have indigenous Native American accounts. So what kind of evidence can we use to understand what non-Roman life was like? Well, we have archaeology. And finally, consider when studying Caesar, how are you learning and or teaching the narrative? How and why are we studying these particular Caesar passages about the Gauls? And what does that say about us in the 21st century? And the great thing about it was the students were just all over the chat, questioning, wondering. So we are going to be covering the Gauls again in the spring semester. And I have some ideas of incorporating more archaeology sources to understand Celtic culture, as this middle map shows you. It was much greater than just Roman Gaul. So thank you.
Wow, I think when you hear Magistra speak, it's very evident why Latin is such a popular world language to study at Miramonte High School. And what she's talking about with regards to reframing the curriculum and looking at it through this new lens of equity, and specifically looking to break down some of our pre-existing ideas about the historical record. That's really a theme that our teachers have been using as they bring more equity into their lessons. It's really more about reframing how we teach the standard than changing our essential standards themselves. So we're going to hear from Ms. Boyko next, who teaches in the computer science and math world, which to some might feel like a hard place to bring an equity lens. But I think you'll see through Ms. Boyko's lessons that she's been able to bring just that to her curriculum.
So I am not taking you anywhere as exciting as ancient Rome. I am taking you on a day in the life of a math teacher at Miramonte, I suppose, here. So I'm teaching math analysis this year. I haven't taught it for several years. And my goal here was to, as we were doing the cohort, the equity cohorts and addressing race, I wanted to come up with some kind of way to show the students how what we're talking about shows up in life. And so I wanted the students to have a way that was creative, where they could collaborate and also demonstrate that they have an understanding of the math concepts as well. And to take a look and dive into data and to see and appreciate what the data is there telling them. So my objective was to take a seemingly boring math concept and enable the students to see how data can help them understand inequities in our society. So Julie, you can go to this really came to the forefront of my mind and my kind of agenda this year between the cohorts and Miramonte's focus on equity, which has been fabulous, was when people were talking about the Tulsa massacre. And here I am thinking, after all these years, I have no idea what it is. And I realized that my life, my view of society was so myopic and so white. And I really have this desire that, like everybody on staff here does, that isn't the way that we teach our students, that they see life in our society as inclusive and as many different backgrounds and religions and colors, etc. And so here I go, my math analysis and how this comes into play. So I'm teaching, you ready, the concepts like understanding domain, range, continuity, and behavior, limits, relative extrema, increasing, decreasing, intervals, and rates of change, which are all really important concepts in math and in physics, etc. And I'm sure all of you miss being in math class at this moment right now. So I was giving an assessment, and as I was writing my assessment, I'm like, wow, this is really not that interesting as I was writing it. So I came up with this idea of showing some raw data. So Julie, if you want to just click on that for me, please. So this was they're in groups and they got this graph. There it is. Nothing's labeled, nothing on it, just a series of points. Okay, and if you can go to the next one then. And the idea with the students was that they had to make their own story. Like, what could have created this graph? What in the world could have created this graph? So this is just the rubric, just to let you know, I came up with a rubric. And if you look on the left, and if Julie can just scroll a little bit, right? It's a lot about covering math topics in this graph. So if you can open the student sample, please. The next one. So, right, so.
Sorry, that's a long rubric. Okay.
It was really detailed because I wasn't exactly sure. It was pretty early in the year and I wasn't sure where my students would be, how much direction they were going to need. So this gives you an idea of one of the groups. So they decided the graph showed the how society was using the word sick. And so that first bump you see, they said was Spanish flu. And that is, they came up with a story explaining the data. And then as they go through, they go and they say where the relative maximas, absolute maximum is what's happening at the time that is, so obviously that's COVID. So, and then they talk about the absolute minimum when people weren't really being diagnosed things. And it just kind of goes from there. They talk about what the data would look like if you took it to an extreme in one direction, extreme in the other, what the rates of change are, and then a summary on what they found and how they have managed to, how their story fits the data. So then the next part of the test was I actually gave them this, the historical data. Okay, so when they get this historical data, they now have axes. And the bottom of it is years, and it goes from 1840, I think, through 1940. Is that what it says there? It's a little hard to read. And then going up the y-axis is the average income of Blacks in Missouri. So now the students go back and they basically do the exact same rubric, but this time, right, they have the actual dates and the axes. So now they have to go in and explain why it is that there is a relative max or you can click on the sample, thank you. So now they go through and they're actually looking at dates and seeing what was happening in Missouri at this time that was causing fluctuations, et cetera, in incomes of Blacks. And so they talked about absolute mins and absolute max and relative max and mins. And you can see that, you know, they're addressing things like the Jim Crow laws, and they're addressing things like the abolishment of slavery and Reconstruction, and what happened during the First World War, and that what happened during the Second World War. And they're looking at it in terms of math and like actually measuring increasing, decreasing functions and rates of change. And then they had to talk about their takeaways. And their takeaways were, as you can see, you know, that history has had a major influence on the income of people, and that the average income per year of African Americans has increased by over 400% in 160 years. And at this point, I actually stopped. That was the end of it. And I realized at this point as the teacher that I wanted them to take this another step, but I wanted them to have ownership of the data. So I didn't want to just give them more information. I wanted them to ask for more information. So I talked to Ms. Parks about it, and she helped me come up with another slide that was going to help me ask the students, what else would you have wanted to know? And sure enough, they wanted to know, what was that occupation that we were tracking? You know, what were whites making in Missouri at the time? And so if you click on Ms. Parks, the first one there, you can see that they were given this piece here, and you can click on that, that's fine. And you can see that you actually get, this is the new data now that they had to add to the old data. And then if you go back, we can take a look at, and so the students put together new, they had to address these new questions. And so if you click on the UGG moment for me, so, okay. So when they did their, this is an UGG moment, and you can see here that the white income in the middle one is obviously higher than the blacks. And what was really interesting to me is the students were even looking at the data. The students were convinced that after the civil rights movement happened, that blacks and whites were making the same amount of money in Missouri. And the data just isn't there. So if you can click on the, let's go back here. I'm gonna go quickly here. And so I was just thrown. I'm like, wow, all this work and my students are missing it. And so we made a question on the test. So Julie, if you can just click on the transformation question. And this was on, I put this on the test. I talked with Katie Watson about it. So the black income is the red dots and the blue is the whites. And you can see it's absolutely a vertical transformation. So at this point, students are working individually, and I really wanted them to see that these were never going to intersect without some kind of structural change. These graphs can't intersect, they're vertical transformations. So the next thing, so the very last thing, I would say that, you know, we're not at the top of the mountain at all. We're like trudging along on that slow hill, trying to find those beautiful places. What I can say was I was really taken back about my students' discomfort in even saying the word Black when they gave their presentations. And that was something that I really, it was something that as I moved forward from one class to the next was I realized I had to have the groups before they gave their presentation actually address that and have a conversation in their groups about why that conversation, just saying the word Black in front of their peers was difficult for them. And so along with the math, right, that we also had a discussion about that. And I am done. That's the end of my journey. Next time I talk to you, we're going to be at the top of the mountain. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cindy. And I'm so grateful for Cindy's work here. This is really, in the education world, we call this project-based learning, and really pushing students to that critical thinking place. And where Cindy leaves off with her questions and how students are going to have these conversations really intersects with the work that we're doing with students on their cohort academy and having those courageous conversations. So in debriefing this with Cindy and thinking about how our norms and protocols and having those conversations can transfer into the classroom space, we're reminded on how important that skill building is for our students to be able to have really great, rich conversations. Ms. Spencer is going to talk a little bit about what is happening in the English classroom, which again intersects with another goal, one specifically around bringing in some new texts into our classroom. So Ms. Spencer.
Good evening, everybody. I am here to talk about one particular project. So following up on Cindy's project-based learning, this was a project related to the 57 bus, a text that we added last year, which has been a great addition because it's nonfiction. It takes place, it's a true story of two Oakland teenagers whose lives tragically intersect. So for our teenagers to read a book about teenagers, I think grabs their attention. And the fact that it's a story that took place so close to Orinda. So one of the things about the 57 bus that makes it such a unique book to read is that it does illuminate a lot of issues around equity. One of the teenagers involved is African-American. The other teenager is non-binary. And they are both growing up in Oakland and take the same bus to and from school, but their lives are very different. So it leads to a lot of different social issues about redlining and segregation and schools. And after reading the book, students had to come up with a research question and then research their topic and present their information to the class. So here's a sampling of questions that the students came up with. How does restorative justice affect minors? Because the young man who commits this crime is originally charged as an adult, and the family of the victim wanted him treated as a juvenile. And because this was a violent crime, restorative justice wasn't an option, but the author does go into restorative justice and other aspects of juvenile justice. Another question, what issues do transgender and genderqueer students face in schools, and how can we make them feel safer? And that was because of one of the, the other central figure in the story. How have different minorities been affected by hate crimes in the United States? And that presentation was very interesting because we were able to learn more about a topic we covered in our equity lessons, which is the scapegoating of Asians with COVID-19. So it was really interesting to kind of look at current events and how that intersects with hate crimes. And then what are the health effects of redlining, again, because of segregation that's due to redlining from the 1940s through 60s. So in the next slide, these are just a few samples of presentations that students had given. They had the opportunity to do a typical Google Slides presentation, or they could create a video or a podcast. So I did one example of each. Hopefully the Google Slides, I think I gave you access, good. Excuse me. So this is a student presentation. And Julie, if you just look at the first two slides, I thought these students did a great job. We talked about incorporating visuals with not too much text, and the students learned how to use the library databases. And if you click on the next slide, the next, back to our slideshow, sorry. And then this was a group that did a video on redlining. And I told them this isn't a video class, so you have to figure out how to do a video. And it was really impressive how the kids figured out the video. So if you're able to just play the first 10 seconds, I was really impressed with this group putting together this video. I don't know if the sound's coming through. Oh, there.
Redlining. Redlining is, in essence, housing segregation. Let me explain more on that.
Okay.
Segregation was in full effect.
So you get the idea. It was a really great video that kind of went through all of the history, and they found primary source documents. And then the last example is a podcast. Also a student giving an overview of redlining and its impacts today.
And this is my podcast about the results of redlining. Redlining was established in 1933 by the Federal Housing Administration. Land was split into red, yellow, and green areas. Green and yellow areas were considered desirable to be given loans, and red was not. People of color were unfairly discriminated against, which made it nearly impossible for them to live in yellow and green areas.
So again, it was just nice to see the students do their research, come up with a question that they wanted to know more about, and then present it in different formats, whichever one appealed to them. So this is my second year doing this particular project, and I am always beyond impressed with the results that students come up with. And I think it, again, goes back to this idea that when we diversify our curriculum, when we add a book that was actually written in the last 10 years, and brings up social issues that are impacting students' lives today, they really appreciate it and they are engaged and the learning seems relevant. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. And what she didn't say, but is also true of her just building equity into her lessons without even thinking about it, is that giving our students choice and how they present information to us is one way that we can bring equity into our curriculum by allowing students to express themselves in a variety of ways and really perform in a way that is comfortable and unique to them. And so she built that in just as part of her pedagogy as a teacher, but it's also a way of bringing equity. We're going to hear a little bit more about student voice from a few more folks that are joining us today. So thank you to our teachers sharing their lessons. They are going to leave our webinar now, and we're going to bring in a few other folks who are going to tell us a little bit about the work behind the scenes to create these types of lessons. It takes a lot of work to build these lessons, and we have lots of teachers who are doing that work with a lot of passion and enthusiasm. But what we've learned is we have some students who want to do that work too. And so we are joined today by a couple students and some teachers who have been working collaboratively on building some curriculum at Miramonte. And just to remind you about where this falls into our plan, our curriculum consultant program is a program we piloted beginning in October. So these students have been meeting with their teachers over the last couple months to develop some ideas and pilot some different lessons that they're going to share with you this evening. And so it is my pleasure to invite this team to talk a little bit about what is going on for them. And I'll have them introduce themselves as they begin to speak so that you know who they are.
Hi, my name is Kelly Ginocchio. I am the Social Studies TOSA as well as the department chair. And I teach two subjects, both World History and AP European History. And it's my goal this year to collect and implement various lessons that fill the gaps in our curriculum, as Ms. Parks was sharing with you earlier, and to change the lens of our analysis of the past to reflect significantly more diverse voices, experiences, and movements across the globe in both modern world history and the marginalized groups in AP European history. Ultimately, we want to promote agency and connection to both the past and current issues around the world so that students are more engaged in our social studies curriculum. They see themselves in what they're learning. We have a focus question, an essential question for the year, and that's specifically how have individuals and societies around the world agitated, advocated for, and demanded liberty and equality? this is not an easy task. And so when I found out that, and I believe one of our guiding coalition meetings, that I had the potential to work with some incredibly bright and engaging and intelligent young women in the form of Gracia Chen and Isabel Bennett, I decided to just jump right in with this incredible opportunity. And so since I'd worked with both of them over the last 2 years, I was immediately able to begin a dialogue of how to find some of these primary and secondary sources so that we could truly like build curriculum that was much more diverse. And so my why is about being committed to this effort, and then also being so excited to bring these students into this project as well. And so I'd like to turn the mic over to Gracia and Isabel, who are going to share their why.
Hi everyone, I'm Gracia. I'm a junior at Miramonte, and I began working with the World History Department to improvise curriculum because as a previous World History student, I recognized the gaps in material in the curriculum. Specifically, I noticed how the curriculum was Eurocentric and did not really touch on other cultures and areas of the world. Thus, my goal is to incorporate various perspectives into the developing curriculum for social science. Though there are certain standards that need to be met in the class, my hope is to diversify the lessons being taught for each unit to ultimately expand each student's understanding. Thus far, this has been exemplified in incorporating diverse sources that lead to discussions in class. Personally, I've contributed sources to topics regarding Latin American revolutions and industrialization. And I hope to continue my process of adding sources for future units. The history department's efforts and mine are being incorporated into the lesson plans through meaningful discussions and readings, and ultimately, these developments align with Miramonte's central goal of equity.
In terms of my why, I'm a multi-ethnic woman of color, and I've realized a lot that my cultural communities have largely been represented and labeled as the victim in history. So my hopes in working with Mrs. Shinokio and other history teachers is to redefine and elevate the role of marginalized groups in European history and enhance student understanding of European politics and culture in the context of a burgeoning international community. And I feel like the best way to create an anti-racist school is to educate my peers and I about how we've developed the prejudiced ideas and oppressive institutions which affect all of us today. And I think now we wanted to go into the different prep docs we have.
So what you see here are essentially the each of the resources that we've been pulling for each specific unit that we are required to teach. This year, the column on the right are each of the various lessons that reflect the diversity that we are attempting to bring in. And so it's been a lot of work, and our world history team is really devoted to trying to expand that curriculum. And you can see that it's a fabulous collaborative document with the help of Gracia. And then we have one that's comparable to this for AP European history, which Isabel has been contributing to as well. And so as we develop those sources, in this case, it's the diverse voices are in the middle and the additional sources are on the outside. And so for every single unit, for AP classes, it's a little harder because we just have so much that we have to study in order to meet the expectations for the AP exam. But here you can see every single one of these units that we've covered thus far, we're trying to bring in diverse voices. And I'm really proud of the work that each of them has done. And I'm really excited to continue collaborating with them this upcoming semester. Thank you.
All right, I'll go for environmental science. Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Smith. I am a science teacher at Miramonte. This year, I'm teaching AP Environmental Science as well as geology. So I want to give some time for our students to talk here today, but I just want to go over my why really quick. So like why I'm here, why I have joined this effort here with our curriculum consultants. So basically, my goal as a teacher is for, especially a science teacher, for all of my students to see themselves in my classroom. All the students to see that they can be scientists, regardless of their gender, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their sexuality, whatever. I want them to know that they can be scientists. And so for me, I think it's really important to bring in different voices and different perspectives into my class in order to allow the students to feel that they are heard. And so last year when I took over environmental science, me and my coworker got really excited about how we can bring some of this equity into our curriculum, because environmental science, yes, it's a science, but it's also at the crossroads of economics and politics and political or public health and so many different things. And so our goal last year, and we're continuing the goal this year, was really for students to understand how our actions can impact the world, in the entire world globally, and especially how our actions impact less developed countries and communities of color within our own country. So when I got the opportunity to join this effort and get some student perspective on the curriculum, I got really excited. And I think my classroom, I like to think of my classroom as not just my classroom, but as like a community of my students. And so being able to hear their own voices and their own perspectives and incorporate that into my curriculum was something that was really important to me and really exciting to me. So that's kind of why I'm here today and why I wanted to join this effort.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Porter. I'm also a science teacher at Miramonte. I'm teaching chemistry and AP Environmental Science this year, teaming up with Miss Smith and our goal of bringing equity into our classroom. My why is very similar to Miss Smith's in trying to make sure that everybody in our classroom believes and knows that they can also be scientists. But I think it's also important to demonstrate how issues of equity permeate through all aspects of our life when we don't even really think about it. And so taking a subject like science that doesn't always naturally lend itself to this kind of immersion of equity and really trying to restructure how we're looking at science and really working to take the different pieces of being a scientist and pushing students to expand their thinking and search for the whole story on both sides of the experimental design research, so that they can deepen their understanding and their skills. And so I think it's really important that we're continuing this work in our science classes so that we are able to kind of give students the tools to do this when they leave us and continue this work in their futures. And so with our amazing curriculum consultants, we have 4 of them that have been working with us these last couple of months. 2 of them are with us today. We have really worked together and met multiple times to hear what do they want to learn about in these classes and what sort of research, what sort of perspectives can they bring to the table so that we can really weave them into what we're doing on the daily basis. And so we were able to kind of take a lot of their notes and guidance and wove it into those intense AP standards that we have to hit. But we'll let them tell you about that, because the lucky perspective from us is that 3 of them of our consultants are actually in the class. And so it allows a unique perspective for them as well. So that's kind of the how we did this, and I'll let Jillian explain the rest.
All right, I just wanted to introduce our curriculum consultants, although you've already met them today. We actually are lucky enough to have 4. So Gracia Chen and Isabel Bennett are here with us tonight. We also have Evan Feldman, who's in my class this year, as well as Gracia and Isabel. And then Rio is a freshman, but he is an environmental enthusiast. So he's been super helpful in our efforts as well. So Gracia and Isabel, take it away with what your perspective is.
Okay, hi again. So for environmental science, my purpose in being here didn't so much stem from my past experience like it did for world history, but from what I currently know and continue to learn about the world. I want to shed light on how environmental issues target certain communities more than others, and due to the collaboration between the teachers and the curriculum consultant team, progress has ensued. One specific instance of this appeared in a recent lesson on soil that we had. So while the topic of soil itself seems rather dull and mundane, our lesson actually taught us how varying soil qualities around the world perpetuates hardships for certain groups around the world. In this case, we explored the effects of bad soil quality in North Africa. And by doing so, the students were able to gain a more thorough understanding of the importance of soil. This lesson was a definite success as it enhanced every student's knowledge about the subject, and we will continue implementing more lessons like these that ultimately expand students' knowledge about environmental issues all over the world.
Hi, everyone. So my primary goals for doing APES consulting was trying to increase representation of all marginalized groups in STEM, and also trying to create an understanding about why this representation has been so limited in history. But I also look forward to showing how certain communities and identities are disproportionately affected by climate change, which we'll see in actual lessons that we've already covered this year. And also, I feel like in many ways, talking about racism in environmental science requires a review of global history and politics. So creating lessons around topics like environmental racism is a really unique opportunity to help students develop interdisciplinary skills and become an engaged global citizen. For example, in urbanization, we talked about how redlining and just environmental racism has caused disproportionate effects of climate change again, like in places like Flint, Michigan. And then also when we're talking about mining and how mining communities have caused a lot of conflict and a lot of this like socioeconomic hierarchy as well.
Wow. So aside from wanting to hire these 2 students to be teachers at our school, I think you can see how successful this partnership really has been, bringing our student voices into the conversation, flattening out the hierarchy of our organization as a school community, and embracing the student feedback is really letting us have this dialogue that is bringing a new perspective to what we bring into the class. These teachers are amazing and already bring in really great ideas of how to bring equity into their classrooms, but through the dialogue that they have with the students, they're able to really understand what the impact is on students and how students are receiving and perceiving what we put out to them. So that's been hugely valuable. This pilot has been really powerful, and we're looking forward to trying to expand and bring more students into the space to be able to have these types of conversations. You can see how powerful the outcomes are. So I want to thank Ms. Porter and Ms. Smith and Isabel and Gracia for their really hard work on this. Also Evan and Rio, who are not here tonight, but have worked really hard also on this, and our other curriculum consultants in a few other classes that are not here reporting out, but may report out in a future meeting so that you can hear a little bit about their process. So thank you very much. And I hope that for those watching in the webinar, this is really painting a picture of the complexity of lesson planning, but also the capacity in really thoughtfully planning and bringing more equity into our classrooms. So as those folks go ahead and exit, I'd love to introduce our folks from Deconstructing Race. So we have a few people joining us this evening. We have Mr. Poling, who is our teacher of the class, And we have Nomi and Zion who are here to talk a little bit about their experiences. And in this portion of the webinar, we hope to really revisit our why. And our why is for our students to learn and connect at these high levels. And one place that we're seeing that happen is within this Deconstructing Race class. So I'm actually going to unmirror so you can see the faces of these panelists as they speak, so that they can talk a little bit about how things are going. And I'm going to rename them because they're in as multiple Steve Pollings. And as much as I would like to clone Steve Polling, we actually have 2 other really unique and powerful voices also. So I will rename them as I unmirror here so that you can see their faces.
All right. As much as I like being me, I would love to be 18 again and have the energy and wisdom that these 2 students have and that they bring to class every day. So let me just say a couple words about the course, and then I really want to feature Nomi and Zion. And we didn't prep a lot for this, but that's because I think that one of the features of this course, in my opinion, is our attempt to learn not just about the topic of race and racism and white supremacy and whiteness and so forth, which, by the way, permeates, as you heard tonight, every aspect of our culture. And we talk about it in terms of science and history and politics and education and so forth. But I also wanted to give you a taste of what I'm most impressed with my students, and that's their ability to converse with each other using the tools of courageous conversation, which have been a real prime focus of our district for a long time and are now starting to make their way into our cohort meetings, but also into a lot of classrooms. And I've had the privilege of working with Zion on Equiteam for many years, and so I'm familiar with his skill with that. And I've known Nomi since she was a freshman and watched her grow through Equiteam, and it's great to have her back as a senior. So the course itself is really a course to examine the many terms I just shared with you. And because it's a brand new course, while I have much written, we've only done a semester. And so I'm as anxious to hear what Nomi and Zion have to say as you are. So Nomi and Zion, I guess I would just give you guys a prompt and let you guys do a little mindful inquiry with each other. And I think I'll ask Zion to go first, and Nomi, you can go second. You can hear Zion out and give him some feedback, and then you guys can switch. But the question really for you 2 tonight, the prompt is this class providing what you wanted from the course as you saw it written up and decided to bravely jump into as juniors last year? And if so, what is that? And if not, what's missing? Because we have more time and no class is ever finalized. So go ahead, Zion, why don't you start, and then Nomi can respond to you, and you guys can take it from there.
All right. Hello. My name is Zion, as you can see. I would say starting out the year, it was kind of like interesting seeing how, the books we were gonna be reading when we went to pick them up from the cafeteria, and I was kind of anxious to see, how would I do? How was I gonna interact with my classmates? But as we approach the end of the semester, this class has truly been, the highlight of my Tuesday, Thursday class days, because it's just every single class, it's so insightful and impactful to hear from, my peers and Mr. Polling about, just the variety of different topics that are included within our curriculum as we deconstruct race. And, for the past years, we've been, working and pushing for more diverse classes that, include race. And this has just been like such a gift because it covers, like like we were talking about earlier in the presentation, just the many causes and then also effects that racism has had throughout history. And so really delving deeply into that, and also giving us, the tools to have conversations about this topic. And I've been able to practice those tools inside of the class and outside, and personal conversations as well as conversations in our cohort academies. So I think in all, this is definitely just a wonderful starting place.
Yeah, so Zion, I hear that you're saying that, at first it was very interesting to see how the course would play out. But then as it did, you were very interested in it and excited for each new day and what to read about and learn about. So what I would have a question for you is there something that specifically stood out to you that you thought was interesting, or something that you could relate to in terms of the content that we read?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, in the past, like classes, we would always just be like, oh, racism. It was kind of like there, and that always kind of like made me wonder, like, how did it start, and how do we get to this point where it's, very ingrained in our society. And that's what we basically went over for these past, I think, month and a half in our book Stamped. And it's just really talking about how race and racism really ingrained itself in our society. And that was just something that really stood out to me, because that was answers that I've been searching for many years. And it really got my mind working on not only what's happened, but what we can do next.
Awesome. You want to go ahead and Nomi and take a shot at that same question from earlier?
Sure. Like Zion, had no idea how the course would actually go. I heard about it and I was like, wow, this is a course that is much needed, and I want to be the one to take it. I am really drawn to the content that we've read and also what we've listened to with the Seeing White podcast or the Seen on Radio. And I've always considered myself a very progressive person, but as I've read, I've like, wow, I have a lot of stuff that I need to work on. And that's, it's difficult to admit that you're in the wrong in a place where you thought you were doing the right things for. But I'm really grateful for the class because it's allowing me to grow. And I'm also very grateful that everyone in the class is willing to grow. So everything has been really smooth. And I'm just like really excited for next semester and what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you, saying we shared those sentiments of that kind of anxiousness, but also a little bit of an anxiety for what the class would hold within, our conversations and what we were learning. But then as we progressed, as you progressed, they, turned out to be very fruitful and impactful. And you were able to reflect on the things that you have done and that you know, and see how those kind of aligned with what we're learning in the class, and reflect on maybe there are things that I can change and need to change. And just first of all, kudos to you for making that acknowledgement and taking those introspective steps to you. I would say a question for me, because I know a large part of our class for this past month has been our fishbowl discussions, or like Socratic seminars. And I just want to ask, like, how has that played a role in, truly getting different ideas, and also, having tough conversations about race and racism in our country?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I just like to let everyone know that I used to hate history. I would not pick up a historical book at all. But now with the books that we're reading, specifically with Stamped, it's not a history book. It says that many times, but it's a historical progression. It's a timeline, and I'm so fascinated by that because it puts everything into perspective. Because we're taught how, like, each event in history as its own distinct points, but they're only like 20 years apart. And that's something that's not emphasized, and that's something that I was able to read about and actually understand. And it's, made me want to read more historical books and learn more about the progression of history and in terms of America and equal rights.
Awesome. So I can't follow that. I'm not even going to. Like, that's a modeling of how, if you put interesting information out there and give kids a chance to practice the tools that you believe in, that you're still trying to practice in your own professional and personal life, and you stick to it, progress occurs. And I can also assure you that if I brought in any other 2 students, not every student is loving their experience in this class, but I think most students could have a conversation where they are listening to each other and asking each other probing questions and figuring out what they really think and how other perspectives might help them hone in, not only on what they think, but on how to make progress in difficult issues. So don't kid yourself that every student in this class is walking away happy and smiling all the time and wanting to read more. There's a lot of tough conversations that we're having, but the way you have them, you just got modeled for you, is just brilliant. And I just want to thank Nomi and Zion for their time tonight and for that modeling of what adults, reasonable and thoughtful and probing conversation looks like.
Wow. Yes, very hard to follow that. So I'm not going to try to do too much. These are 2 exceptional students that really do represent our aspirational goals at Miramonte High School. And what you witnessed in terms of that mindful inquiry, students are doing this at a high level, at the high level that you just saw from these 2 students throughout our campus as we teach these protocols in our cohort academy sessions. Not all of them use them with the same degree of sophistication that you saw here, but that's really our goal, is for every student to be able to communicate and listen at the level that you just saw there. Listening is a skill. And I think that one of the things that many of us have observed over the last few years is that we need to do a little bit more listening. And providing space to listen specifically to our students is a big piece of that. And through some of these programs that we were talking about tonight, you're seeing how we are creating that space and continuing to push ourselves and push through the discomfort of allowing that space for our students. Because as you heard from Mr. Poling, not every student has a wonderful experience to share. And it's our responsibility as the adults and the positions of power that we hold in our schools to provide space for those students to speak their truths and then respond to those truths in a way that really does create an equitable, positive experience at Miramonte High School, where all of our students can learn and connect at high levels. So I just really want to honor Zion and Nomi for that beautiful modeling of a skill that we're really working on, and what that can look like for all of our kids to be able to do that. So to close us out, I just have one more thing. And again, I'm not going to talk a lot because following students is a bad idea. But I do want to share a couple of our next steps with you so you know what's coming up next. So right now we are believe it or not, in the midst of trying to get ready for a hybrid schedule, but also gearing up for course enrollment for next school year. Yes, both of those things are happening at once, which is very exciting, especially since next year we're looking to add some more courses. And you heard from Zion that there's been a desire from our students to see more classes that focus specifically on equity at our school. And we are discussing 3 particular classes being added to our courses of study for next year. One is an English for selective in women's literature. It's actually more expansive than just women's literature. This particular class does focus on female authors, but also different gendered perspectives in literature. And so it isn't exclusive just to women. And it really offers a capstone course for students interested in exploring gender in literature at the next level, like we've been able to offer with our Deconstructing Race class in terms of looking at race. So we're excited about that. We're also considering the addition of ethnic studies as a semester course and adding AP World History, which really provides a very global perspective on history that right now is missing in our AP courses. And so that would be an exciting addition for us. Also, we're looking at rewriting the leadership course of study. Many of you may be aware that we have an equity and leadership class this year, and we're really looking to bring that lens to our leadership class in general. And so we're going to be doing some hard work over the next semester on making that happen. We're in a unique position where when we come back to school, there's some historical memory that and some institutional memory that may not be here anymore after we've been off campus for a full year. And that gives us a really powerful chance to rebuild culture at Miramonte in a way that really aligns with our vision for this school space. So we want to take advantage of that and the opportunity that we have. We are looking to have more equity lessons for the second semester. We will have 2 lessons very specifically focused on LGBTQ+ experiences. Our students in the various clubs throughout our district are collaborating with our district office in writing those lessons. So we're very excited about that. It's a perspective that our students are asking for. So that will be a great way to enter into the second semester. Our students in our equity leadership class also surveyed all of our students in Academy on Monday about topics that they'll be interested in. So we look forward to getting our students involved in writing some of those equity lessons that we bring into our Mondays in the next semester. And lastly, we're working with a group of alumni students who are interested in continuing to do this work at Miramonte, even though they've graduated and moved on. So we're really excited to bring them into the conversation and have an opportunity to access some of their wisdom from what they've learned as they've gone out into the world. So I really want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, I'll post this up on the YouTube channel and I'll publicize it in the Matador News this week. So please, those of you who are here, encourage other folks to watch this because the work that we're doing in here is work we're really proud of. So thank you so much. Have a good evening and go Mets.